Hunter Biden receives a guilty verdict for his gun charges, just as I predicted that he would. So we're going to go over that. We're actually going to review some of what we talked about last week on why this is one of the biggest electoral gifts that Joe Biden could have got this election cycle, what this means for the Biden campaign, the Trump campaign, and where we go from there. In other news, also very, very important, by the way, the Supreme Court has struck down a Trump-era ban on bump stocks. And a lot of people are out there trying to say that it was Trump who initially wanted to have this ban struck down and how we need to have this ban and everything else. Forgetting, of course, the fact that it was Trump's bump stock ban to begin with. So we'll go over some of that, some of the corruption accusations that are coming from this, and even a bill from two people on the East Coast trying to rein in a corrupt Supreme Court. So we'll go over some of that, what happens there, and where we go with that. Donald Trump attempts to sit down and revamp our tax system, going into tariffs and eliminating the income tax. And, well, the people at large in the government don't like that because, of course, they don't. We're going to go over some of what's happening with that and what happens there and where we go with that. And Russia proposes a ceasefire with some concessions, of course, from the Ukraine, and Volodymyr Zelensky gives him the finger. So we're going to be talking about that, what is happening there, and what we do with that. It is going to be all of this and more over here on Contemporary. So strap yourselves in, grab some friends, get something to eat, and we will see you on the other side of the title card. And leaning now into the breeze, remembering Sunday he falls to his knees. They had breakfast together, but 2 eggs don't last. Like the feeling of what he needs. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. So I aired all of my grievances last week on what was going on with the Hunter trial, so I don't have to go over why this was ridiculous, why this is a distraction, what it is that the DOJ was actually hoping to do with this, or where this is going to go, because I already know where this is going to go. We are going to talk about the conviction. We are going to talk a little bit today, though, about the fact that, yes, now they're coming back out here, doing exactly what I said that they were going to do, and say that it's just Donald Trump that's having sour grapes because he thinks the justice system is unfair. And look how fair it is. They went after a president's kid. It's so fair. Dude, Hunter was the sacrificial lamb, and we're going to go over that briefly. That's going to be the top story for the day. We're not going to spend a ton of time on that again, because I spent an exorbitant amount of time on that last week. But we do have a bunch of stuff to go over here today. Biden had another senior moment, and, well, they're trying to come back out and cover for that. And I didn't get any clips of this for this, but I guess Karine Jean-Pierre got onto the stage and started screaming about the fact that, hey, now it's AI that's to blame for the fact that people are able to make Biden look bad. Like, we're using, how'd she say? It was deep fakes and nothing is real and don't believe your eyes or anything else like that. So we'll talk a bit about that once we get to that segment of this. We had 8 ISIS terrorist attack who illegally entered and were caught, thankfully, at the southern border. But, when they get 8 through, how many didn't get caught? We'll be talking a bit about some of that here. The House has passed a defense bill automatically registering men 18 to 26 to the Selective Service. Now, there was supposed to be something about registering women. I was not able to find a green check verified source that went with that, but allegedly there is a bill that's circulating as well, and we'll talk about this next week if I can find a verified source for that. That also drafts women in the event that we do need to come back out and draft. So that's something to keep watch for as well as we go. So we've got a lot to go over here today over here at Contemporary, so it's going to be some time. Let's go over the live chat real quick, see what it is you guys are saying. Looks like you guys have been busy already, and the Nightbot actually popped somebody already. Thank you for that. That's actually what I put it in there for. Was it's not to grab the caps lockers, even though that was like when that was implemented. The caps lockers were a big problem. The white supremacists love to come out and type everything in all caps, so I put a stop to that. But yeah, Palm is here first, of course. Mog is last. The crown badge is, if you've got Prime and are using a Prime membership. It's not necessarily if you have Prime, but if you're actually actively using a Prime subscription, then that's where your crown badge shows up, because I have that in most other chats as well. Or I'm secretly British royalty. I don't know about that, although South Carolina, maybe. I used to have a Queen of England emote. The Mog is marked safe from being in Hunter Biden's laptop. Black UUPL is banned for trying to advertise viewers. Vong says, I'll be the bot actually does do the other things than pressing my caps lock. Yeah, well, people ruined that before you ever came over to this channel, so. Friends, what language is that? Does Vaughn get booted out by the bot? No, it just deletes his message and times him out for like 5 seconds. The bot can only time out for 5 seconds at a time, but typically if a spammer cannot type more than one message, they just leave this, the stream. When do we restart the draft? I think it's when Ukraine starts losing. Yes, I know that, Palm. Alright, let's get down into the news, shall we? Just want to check on one other thing over on the Discord here, so it looks like I had 2 pings. But we got to get started over here, shall we? We're going to start today, like I said before, with the Hunter Biden news. So let's start with video from MSNBC. Breaking: Hunter Biden found guilty on all counts. Let's listen.
I'm told we can't report it yet.
The jury
we're
finds
verifying
him guilty. Count 2, the jury finds Hunter Biden guilty. And on count 3, which is possession of a firearm by a drug user or drug addict, guilty. Hunter Biden has just been found guilty on all 3 of the counts against it.
I'm told we can't report it yet.
The jury finds.
Surprisingly enough, and I'm sure that they probably cut that to make sure, but they got rid of all the commentary because I'm sure that all 4 of the men on the screen wanted to come out and tell everybody how evil and rigged the system was because, hey, they're going after Biden and that's who's in power in the preferred party of the people of MSNBC. But as I said last week, this is probably the greatest electoral gift that Joe Biden could have ever received for his campaign, especially doing this during an election year. It's part of the reason that I thought that even in a very, very friendly Delaware, where, the Bidens have done favors for people in Delaware, that's what they do. That's why they get voted in there so many times and as many times as they do. Even with that being the case in any of this, I'm sure that there were conversations with the jury pool, and with the people who were coming in to say, hey, make sure that you do this, because, hey, we just tried to throw Donald Trump in prison. So we need to make the justice system look like it works both ways, like they're not playing favorites or doing political persecution. Especially given the fact that this trial came out just a couple weeks after the Trump trial was over. So I'm sure that if there'd have been a not guilty in the Trump trial, the charges would have either been dismissed or they would have been not guilty on all counts. But that is what we see for that. Let's grab one from the Associated Press. President Biden's son Hunter is convicted on all 3 felonies in federal gun trial. From Randall Chase, Claudia Lauer, Michael Kunzelman, Alana Durkin-Richer, and Colleen Long. Hunter Biden was convicted Tuesday of all 3 felony charges related to the purchase of a revolver in 2018, when prosecutors argued the president's son lied on a mandatory gun purchase form by saying he was not illegally using or addicted to drugs. Of course, making all of the gun nuts suddenly in favor of gun laws. That's always been a fun pretzel to watch people twist themselves through. Hunter Biden, 54, stared straight ahead and showed little emotion as the verdict was read after jury deliberations that lasted only 3 hours, over 2 days in Wilmington, because of course they did. He hugged his attorney, smiled wanly, and kissed his wife Melissa before leaving the courtroom with her. President Brandon said in a statement issued shortly after the verdict that he would accept the outcome and continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal. Make no mistake, once the sentencing is over on this one, that kid is getting pardoned. Now, Biden claims that he's not going to. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. We'll talk a bit about that. And it won't happen until after the election, but I mean, if you believe that Joe Biden's not going to pardon his son after telling the world how much he loved his son and everything else over the past 3 years, I got a bridge to sell you. Now, Hunter Biden and presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump, the president's chief political rival, have both been convicted by American jurors in an election year that's been as much about the courtroom as about campaign events and rallies. Hunter faces up to 25 years when he is sentenced by District Judge Mary Ellen Noriega. Though as a first-time offender, he would not get anywhere near the maximum, and there's no guarantee the judge would send him to prison. She won't. She did not set a sentencing date, because it's not going to come until after the election. Defense attorney Abby Lowell said that they will continue to vigorously pursue all legal challenges available in a written statement. Hunter said he was disappointed by the outcome but grateful for the support of family and friends. The jury's decision was read swiftly after the announcement that it reached a verdict. First Lady Jill sat through nearly every day of the trial but did not make it to the courtroom in time to hear the verdict. Hunter walked out of the courthouse holding hands with the First Lady and his wife before they got into a waiting SUV and drove off. Joe Biden steered clear of the federal courtroom where his son was tried and said little about the case. Bullshit! He spouted off on that every chance that he got, where of appearing to interfere in a criminal matter brought by his own Justice Department, which has never been a problem for him to begin with. He had no problem weighing in on the Chauvin case or the Kyle Rittenhouse case. But allies of the Democrat have worried about the toll that the trial and now the conviction will take on the 81-year-old who has long been concerned with his only living son's health and sustained sobriety. So that is what happened. Let's double check this here. Does the draft obey exclusions determined by the military? Yes. I'm too old for the draft as well. So age excludes, what is the age limit? 30 is the age limit. Oh, you said 26, says Google. I thought it was 30. They might have changed it recently, but I thought it was 30 at one point. Unless they changed that because they need more people, of course. Mogg says, did you notice it was federal? If it had been state charges, Biden could not save him. Yes, exactly. Who did the charging? That was the Biden DOJ. Merrick Garland was the one who signed off on that. Why didn't they do a state charge like the Trump situation? Well, the thing with the Trump situation is they had to make that into a state charge. Like, they didn't go after what is, quote, the federal charge that is at the center of upgrading everything to a felony, because Donald Trump could presumptively get into office, which it very much is looking like he is, if the polling is any indicator off of this, and go and pardon himself from the federal charge and nullify all the state charges, which still the state charges should be nullified no matter what. But by having him guilty on state charges brought forward by a DA, Alvin Bragg, who is at a state level, then he actually cannot pardon himself from the federal office. Kathy Hochul could pardon him, and we have something like that about that rather on Things That I Like, because, I like it because other people have noticed the same things that I have, and we'll talk about that later. But yeah, that's why they did this on a federal charge, because the Biden can save him. Now, going on to where I said I called this one. Reading from CNN, Hunter Biden conviction shatters Trump's persecution narrative, which is exactly why they needed him to be brought on charges and convicted during an election year, and why they scheduled the trial until after the Trump trial. This is an analysis, which is an op-ed from Stephen Collinson. An unprecedented 2 weeks of legal drama that yielded historic convictions of a former president and a sitting president's son have also produced a clear political takeaway. The survival of the rule of law in America and untainted justice may depend on the choice voters make in November. The country's divergent possible paths under President Biden or presumptive GOP nominee Donald Trump were highlighted in the way that both men, their families, and their political operations reacted to the twin trials and verdicts. Biden made no effort to interfere in the prosecution of his son Hunter, which is bullshit by the way, and with either his executive authority or with the media megaphone of his office, he allowed his own Justice Department to secure a guilty verdict Tuesday that could result in jail time for the recovering addict and hurt his own 2024 campaign. No, Collinson, I know that you want to come back out here and shout that this is fairness and this is just as hard on Joe Biden's campaign as on Trump's. That is a lie. And once again, if there would have been a not guilty or a hung jury in the Trump trial, then Hunter would have walked free. This did nothing but help the Biden campaign. I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial, the Dewey Decimal System as Hunter considers an appeal, the president said after the jury found his son guilty of lying on a federal background check form and possessing a gun while addicted to or using illegal drugs. He has already said he won't pardon his son. The first reaction, the verdict, Hunter didn't attack the judge or prosecutor, simply saying he was grateful for the love and support of his family and blessed to be clean again. The Biden's comportment contrasted with Trump's reaction to his own trial and conviction. Nearly 2 weeks ago, in the hush money case, the ex-president lashed out at the witnesses, prosecutors, jurors, and the judge. He claimed that this was done by the Biden admin in order to wound or hurt a political opponent. He blasted, "A rigged decision," despite the fact that DOJ was not involved in the case brought by the Manhattan DA since then. Trump has been warning he'll use presidential powers to punish his political opponents and bend the legal system to his will. Although, remember, one of the top DOJ lawyers stepped down from his position and took a position in the Manhattan DA's office right before this trial started. Two Trump claims discredited by Hunter Biden verdict. Throughout his trial in Manhattan, his former hometown, Trump insisted he couldn't get a fair verdict in a city that votes mostly Democratic, but Delaware is a blue state, and a jury there just convicted his president's son. One juror told CNN Tuesday that politics never came up in the deliberations. Jurors in Trump's trial have yet to speak, perhaps because of fears that they could be identified following the ex-president's intimidation tactics. Had Biden been acquitted, Republicans would surely have argued that a biased jury in a state where everyone seems to know the first family had proven their point. That's why he was found guilty. But the guilty verdict blew another of the political arguments out of the water. And again, I remind you, no, it didn't. But this is CNN. And it's an op-ed, too, so they say analysis, but it's an op-ed. On to the commutation. Take a couple of these tabs out of here. Biden says he would not commute potential sentence for son Hunter Biden. Let's see if he holds true to that in the days in between if he happens to, quote, lose the election. From Molly Nagel over at ABC. President Biden said Thursday he would not issue a presidential sentence commutation for Hunter following his conviction earlier this week on federal gun charges. Notice he didn't say pardon. ABC News senior White House correspondent Selena Wang reported that Biden was asked about the issue following his press conference with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Italy, where the two announced a new security agreement. Reporters, shouting over music, pressed Biden, "Would you commute Hunter's sentence, Mr. President? Do you plan on commuting your son's sentence?" The president answered with a no. Hunter was found guilty, and we know what happened with that. President Biden has expressed love for his son while committing to respecting the trial's outcome and repeatedly ruling out a pardon. No, it sounds like he ruled out a commutation, not a pardon. So, he says that he won't commute the sentence. Will he go full pardon? We will see. Will Hunter go to prison? Here's what happens next after his conviction. Most likely not, although there is a chance that he will if Merchan does decide to use Rikers Island against Trump. But it won't be a very long sentence if he does. From Erica Orden and Kyle Cheney. Hunter Biden's conviction on 3 felony gun-related charges presents complicated legal and political challenges for his father, President Biden, and for the justice system as a whole. The verdict is certain to ripple across an already tense and unsettled political landscape, coming just 2 weeks after Trump's own conviction on felony charges in New York. So what happens now? There are several routine steps that all federal defendants must complete following a conviction. First, Biden will have to sit for an interview with a probation officer from the U.S. Probation and Pretrial Services System. He will be asked about his personal history, mental health, and circumstances that resulted in his conviction, among other questions. The probation office will use that information to write a pre-sentence report for Judge Mary Ellen Noriega, who oversaw the trial and will handle the sentencing after the verdict was issued on Tuesday. Noriega said she expects to hold a sentencing hearing in about 4 months. At some point before the sentencing hearing, prosecutors and Biden's lawyers will each submit sentencing memos to the judge that recommended the punishment and summarize Biden's personal and family history, his relationship to his community, and any factors related to his conviction, such as history of substance abuse. After reviewing the pre-sentence report and the sentencing memos, the judge will impose a punishment for Biden at a sentencing hearing. Though Biden faces a maximum of 25 years, the judge has a menu of other sentencing options short of prison, including probation, home detention, or even a curfew. Spoiler alert, he's going to pay a fine and be out the door. Is Biden going to prison? The likelihood that Biden is sentenced to prison is pretty low, said Jeffrey Brown, co-chair of Dechert, LLP's Enforcement and Litigation Practice, who previously served as co-chief of the General Crimes Unit in the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office. I think he has a lot of sympathetic factors in his favor that would argue for a non-incarceratory sentence, Brown said. Those include Biden's lack of criminal history, the likelihood that many people, including some prominent figures, will write to the judge to support of him, and the fact that the charges against him aren't ones that commonly go to trial. Which is another reason I look at this and say that he was a sacrificial lamb for this. Because you usually don't go to trial for this. This is usually what you plead down to and pay a fine. The judge must consider sentencing disparities, Brown said, and I'd be surprised if there's a lot of precedent for people going to trial, getting convicted, and sentenced to prison for this offense. If he's sentenced to prison, will he be able to remain free while he appeals? Biden has a significant chance of being able to delay any prison sentence while he appeals the verdict, Brown said. He predicted that if Biden does receive a prison sentence, it'll be fairly short, and judges sometimes allow defendants to delay shorter sentences while they appeal. Otherwise, a defendant might serve the entire sentence before the appeal is resolved. Even if Biden can't delay any prison sentence, Brown said he may not end up in prison by Election Day. That's because his sentencing hearing likely won't take place until October. And after that, he would need to be designated to a prison facility and receive a surrender date, making it a close call whether Biden would be ordered to report to prison by early November. Everything would have to go very quickly and smoothly for him to be in jail by Election Day, Brown said. Can Hunter still vote for his dad? It depends. If Biden registered to vote in Delaware, it's highly unlikely. The state only permits felons to vote after they complete their entire sentence, including any period of probation or supervised release, which would typically last at least a year. That means if Biden is sentenced to roughly 4 months after his conviction, he will be ineligible to vote this election cycle. But Biden has been living recently in California. If he's registered there, it's a different story. The state allows felons to register and vote as long as they're not serving time in local, state, or federal prison or detention facility. Given that Noriega signaled that she'll hold a sentencing hearing in October, Biden would almost surely have a chance to cast an early ballot, if not vote on Election Day itself, before any potential sentence kicks in. Can Biden pardon his son? The president said last week he would not pardon his son. But he can always go back on that promise, and a pardon is not his only option. Presidents have nearly unfettered power to pardon federal crimes, and they can use pardon power, which is enshrined in the Constitution, for virtually any reason and for any person except perhaps themselves. I don't see him going to prison. Like I said, I think that there's going to be a fine in process. He'll get a pardon to get it off of his record, and he won't see a day in prison. Can he vote if he gets his sentence commuted? Yes. Not if he gets a sentence commuted, but if he gets a full pardon, then yes. His sentence commutation will depend on the state. In this state, no, he would not be able to. In California, he can. In Delaware, I believe he cannot. An interesting one, going back to the analysis from Stephen Collinson from the Associated Press. Republicans stick to attacking the criminal justice system, echoing Trump after Hunter conviction. From Jonathan J. Cooper and Eric Tucker. Republicans are responding to Hunter's conviction on federal gun charges with some version of, "That's it?" Loyal to Trump, they largely echo the former president's claim that the DOJ has treated President Joe Biden's son with kid gloves. While zealously prosecuting Trump, under the attention given to Hunter's conviction for charges related to buying a gun while addicted to drugs, they pressed unsubstantiated or debunked allegations that Joe, while vice president, acted to advance his family members' foreign business interests. The GOP's argument that Biden is ordering prosecutors to target political opponents has been hurt by the Biden-led DOJ. That's such bullshit. Prosecuting the president's son, with Biden declining to stop the investigation or pardon Hunter Biden. But in making that case, Republicans may be trying to deflect from Trump's own stated intentions to wield the criminal justice system against opponents if he returns to the White House. Like I said last week, no, this is crap. CNN and ABC both said the same thing. This case, this charge that they have here, almost never goes to trial. Unless you screwed up and fucked up so badly otherwise, this doesn't go to trial. And the fact that this went to trial is a distraction from the fact that we still have the laptop from hell. And we've still seen what was in the laptop from hell. And called on Hunter to be charged for many of that, but also to call on Biden to answer for the fact that he said that he had no business dealings with any of Hunter's coworkers, and yet we have pictures of them together, emails stating that they're together, and emails showing the fact and documenting the fact that yes, Joe Biden had a hand in what his son was doing overseas. I don't care about this gun charge, and neither do most smart Republicans at that point. There are the idiot my team versus your team ones out there who think that, hey, because he's a Biden, he should be prosecuted for crimes because he's obviously guilty of something, so we got to get him in prison no matter what, which is what the left turned around and did to Trump. But most gun advocates that I know look at this and say, this law's unconstitutional anyway, so why is he being pulled up on charges on it? Again, of course, as a distraction of the fact that, hey, we've got shady business dealings going on, and they involve members of Hunter's family, as well as other politically connected, individuals. So, but they picked an easy one to go back through and one that barely gets any sort of prison time. All right, got to refresh this one. Touch on this one briefly as soon as I get the refresh over. Hopefully it'll take me longer to get it refreshed and get the continue without supporting than it will to read through this. Jill reacts to Hunter Biden's conviction. I'm sorry, that is Dr. Biden. If you don't say Dr. Biden, it means you're some sort of sexist. From Mike Mamoli and Megan Leibowitz. Dr. Biden discussed Hunter's trial with NBC News during a campaign swing on Saturday, the first time she has commented on his conviction after he was found guilty on 3 felony gun-related charges. Dr. Biden said the trial marked a tough week for my family, explaining that they have to relive tough times. Still, she said, she drew inspiration from Hunter's conduct in recent days. I think after the decision in the court, Hunter was strong, so I have to take that as an example and get out there and start fighting again, the good doctor said. Dr. Biden has spent the past few days traveling to states that could prove vital to her husband's shot at returning to the Oval Office. She has led public events in Wisconsin, Minnesota, which is in play right now, and Arizona. And she traveled to California on Saturday evening for a star-studded fundraiser that the campaign says has already set a Democratic Party record, but still not the 24-hour record, thanks to the post-conviction bump. Her travel blitz comes after she spent much of the trial inside the courtroom, even shuttling back and forth from France to be in the room in Delaware. So, Dr. Biden weighing in. Take that for what it's worth. Palm says, some doctors are too full of themselves. I remind you that Dr. Jill Biden is not a medical doctor. It's just an insistence that the mainstream media told us that we had to do, and then failed to do themselves, of course, as you can see from this article. Because she has a PhD in education. Because she has a PhD in education, that means it is sexist if we don't call her Dr. Biden at every chance that we get. All right, I got one that our friend Midget B brought us here from News 4 Jacksonville. Hunter Biden case answers Trump's critics concerning fairness of America's justice system. Palm says it's usually the PhD doctors who are full of themselves, and Mark says, Dr. Biden, not so, medical woman. I'm I'm going to skip this one. Sorry, Midget B, because the Associated Press article we read earlier did a bunch with this. I got just a couple more after this. So, Hunter conviction puts a wrinkle in the 2024 campaign. No, it doesn't, but The Hill is going to pretend that it does, from Alex Gangitano and Brett Samuels. Hunter's guilty verdict marks the latest wrinkle thrown into the 2024 campaign. For Biden, the outcome blunts Republican claims of a two-tiered justice system. But those close to Biden say the personal toll will be heavy for a man who is close with his family, as evidenced by a quickly arranged trip to Delaware to be with his son following the verdict. David Axelrod said the psychological impact on Biden is the biggest question in the aftermath of the verdict. Well, that sounds more like an excuse for when he does poorly in the debate. You know, Joe Biden has lost 2 kids and he's watched his son battle addiction, and this is a blow. This is a blow, Axelrod said in his podcast, Hacks on Tap. But the verdict also creates a curveball for Trump and his campaign, who must weigh how aggressively to attack the president over his son. MAGA, hold on. We got to stop for a second and making a bit of an advisement here. MAGA. Don't want to be one of you guys, but love you guys to death. Listen to me very carefully. Do not bring this up. This will only hurt you at this point. Leave it alone. Don't go after the president's son. There's enough to go after the president for. Are you going to listen to me? Probably not. But this is my advice to you. I don't know what the hell that was. Something just fell. Whew. I guess we'll have to come back and figure out at some point. I know there's supposed to be thunderstorms here, but that might have been out in the hall too. We'll find out. Hunter files motion for a new trial in federal gun case, then mysteriously cancels it seconds later. Priscilla DeGregory for the New York Post. Hunter's lawyers asked Monday for a new trial based on a technicality following the first son's conviction last week on charges he lied about his drug use to buy a gun, only to scrap their request minutes later. Lawyers instantly filed papers in Delaware on Monday morning, saying the trial judge, Mary Ellen Noriega, didn't have jurisdiction over Hunter's case due to pending rulings by the Philadelphia-based Third Court of Appeals. Noriega has rejected multiple motions to toss the charges against Hunter, including the defense argument that the case should be dismissed on the grounds that it violated the first son's Second Amendment rights. A 3-judge panel upheld Noriega's rulings, but the appeals court has still not ruled on a request to have the question reconsidered by the full Third Court. The Third Circuit, however, did not then and has not yet issued its mandate as to the orders dismissing either appeal. Hunter's lawyer, Abby Lowell, wrote in the filing, thus, when this court empaneled the jury on June 3rd and proceeded to trial, it was without jurisdiction to do so. Moments later, however, it appeared the motion has been rescinded. Do you know why? Because the Biden campaign needs this conviction. It's the ghost knocking shit around for making your viewers watch the View clips. I don't know about that. Sure scared the shit out of me, though. So, that's the Hunter stuff. I spent a lot longer on that than I wanted to. I spent almost 35 minutes on that. For something that I called in the air a week ago. Alright, let's move on to big surprise news. Who could have seen this coming? From the Associated Press, Republicans vote to hold Carlin in contempt of Congress. Here's what that means. From Farnoosh Amiri. Merrick Garland became the third AG in U.S. history to be held in contempt on Wednesday as Republicans moved to punish the DOJ for refusing to turn over audio related to Biden's handling of classified documents. This is a symbolic move anyway, because let me remind you, we can read the full transcript. Contempt is one of the U.S. lawmakers' politically messiest and until recent years least used powers. It's a tool that the House and Senate can employ either to coerce compliance with subpoena or to remove any obstruction from an ongoing investigation. By approving a contempt resolution, the House effectively recommended that Garland be prosecuted. In recent cases against allies of former President Trump, including Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, have proven that a contempt resolution is far from symbolic, creating the basis for a case that can sometimes hold up in court. Why are they pushing to hold him in contempt? Because he won't turn over the tapes. That's it. What is contempt? A contempt of Congress is an enforcement mechanism for lawmakers that's enshrined in legal code. Under U.S. law, it's considered a misdemeanor criminal offense to willfully fail to comply with a valid congressional subpoena for producing documents or testimony, according to a report from the Nonpartisan Congressional Research Service. But what amounts to contempt of Congress is often in dispute, which means that a contempt vote by the House or the Senate is only the beginning of a potential legal process. It's up to prosecutors to turn a contempt resolution into a case. And it's up to a jury to decide whether a person is guilty of a crime. Some contempt resolutions are never acted upon. That's the case here, by the way. What are the penalties for being held in contempt? Contempt votes have become more frequent in recent years with serious repercussions for the defendants. If the DOJ decides to take up the contempt resolution and pursue a case, violations can be punishable by a fine of up to $100,000 and imprisonment for not less than a month and not more than 12 months, according to the CRS. So you get a year in the clink. Yeah, and that's something that Bannon served. But the thing with this is the fact that Garland is being held in contempt, and the department that would be responsible for pushing the prosecution is the one that he heads. Which is why, of course, from the BBC, U.S. declines to charge Merrick Garland for contempt. From Max Matza, the DOJ declined to press charges against AG Garland for contempt of Congress after the House of Representatives narrowly voted to punish him for his refusal to hand over audio tapes from an investigation into President Biden. The Republican-controlled House voted 216 to 207 on Wednesday to recommend that the DOJ department that Garland oversees file criminal charges against America's top law enforcement officer. Second law enforcement officer, the top one is Joe. Joe Biden, the president, is the top law enforcement officer in the country. In a letter sent to Republican Speaker of the House Mike Johnson on Friday, a top DOJ official said, "The department that found that Mr. Garland's actions do not constitute a crime." Mr. Johnson called the move sadly predictable. Well, yeah, the department that the guy you're holding contempt heads said, "Nah." If you're listening on the audio platform, you missed what that was. But Mike Johnson is going to vow to take the next step. We'll see what that is. From The Hill, Johnson vows to take Garland contempt case to court after DOJ snub. From Lauren Irwin, Speaker Johnson said Friday that the House will take their contempt of Congress case against AG Garland to court after the DOJ refused to pursue charges. It's sadly predictable the Biden admin's DOJ will not prosecute its head member for defying a congressional subpoena, even though the department aggressively prosecuted Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro for the same thing. But remember who they supported. Johnson said in a statement referring to the two allies of former President Trump that Associated Press reported. This is yet another example of a two-tier justice system brought to us by the Biden admin. Earlier Friday, the DOJ issued a determination that Garland had committed no crime when he failed to meet the demands of House Republicans who subpoenaed audio of Special Counsel Hur's investigation with President Biden amid the president's classified documents probe. CNN reported that Johnson said he would be certifying the contempt records to the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, and he will be moving to enforce the subpoena in federal court, which realistically, and because this has been utilized so seldom in history, there's probably not a mechanism thus far to enforce a congressional contempt charge against the head of the department that would normally be enforcing it. One of the things I'd like to see out of this, and I don't think that we should be holding somebody in congressional contempt every third week. I don't think we should be doing that. One of the things that I'd like to see out of this is an actual defined procedure for what to do if you're holding the head of the DOJ in contempt, who would be prosecuting himself at that point. I'd love to see an actual answer to that question. So that's the Garland case. That is stalled out where it is. Johnson swears he's going to do something about it, but I don't think he's got the Johnson to do it. Let's go on to the bump stock ban from the New York Post. Supreme Court overturns Trump's ban on bump stocks, from Sam Chamberlain. The Supreme Court ruled on Friday that a ban on bump stocks, attachments that allow semi-automatic rifles to fire more quickly, implemented by former President Trump in 2017, was unconstitutional. Based. In a 6-3 ruling, the court found that the ATF had overstepped its authority by classifying bump stocks as illegal machine guns. Mogg says, I miss the days when AGs were brave men. Bring back Janet Reno. We conclude that semi-automatic rifle equipped with a bump stock is not a machine gun, Clarence Thomas wrote for the majority, because it does not fire more than one shot by a single function of the trigger. Even if a semi-automatic rifle with a bump stock could fire more than one shot by a single function of the trigger, Thomas went on, it would not do so automatically. The Trump admin issued the bump stock ban following the October 1st, 2017 mass shooting at a country music festival in Vegas that killed 60 people and wounded hundreds more. A Texas gun store owner, Michael Cargill, challenged the regulation, which reversed the ATF precedent from W. and Barack Obama admins that held that bump stocks didn't transform semi-automatic weapons into machine guns. So, there are a few things that go along with this. Number one, no, a bump stock does not make it into a machine gun. 2, a bump stock does not make anything more accurate. Like, if you're going out to create a mass shooting in something other than a crowd, and I mean, we've still got questions about what happened in Vegas and a lot of stuff I can't ask the question of because this is a YouTube video. But a bump stock is a range toy. That's realistically, when you boil it down, that's what it is. You lose accuracy because in order to make the rocking motion on the gun that simulates, quote, automatic fire, I mean, your barrel is going like this. I mean, if you're on the audio platform, you can't see what I'm doing, but you've got an idea. If you're using the recoil to bump against your shoulder to simulate a single trigger pull causing multiple shots to go, then yeah, you're bouncing all over the fucking place. It's fun to go make a bunch of racket, but at ammo with the prices they are, I do think that it's kind of stupid. I think bump stocks are kind of crazy. But people should be able to go and get them if they want them, either way. No reason to see any of them banned. People could spend their money on all kinds of stupid shit. Oh, we don't say that around here, Mogwai. We're not Ilhan Omar. But yes, this ban was completely unconstitutional, and I called the Donald out on it at the time. Got some video here from NBC News. Supreme Court rejects Trump-era ban on bump stocks for guns. Let's listen.
It was the deadliest mass shooting in American history, unleashed near the Vegas Strip. A gunman killing 60 people at a concert, injuring hundreds more. His arsenal of weapons outfitted with bump stocks, prompting former President Trump to classify them as machine guns and ban them.
We've taken important steps, but much work remains to be done.
Today, the Supreme Court's conservative majority saying that ban went too far. Bump stocks allow semi-automatic rifles to fire more quickly, hundreds of rounds per minute, harnessing a gun's natural recoil to allow a user to bump the trigger faster. The justices wrestled with whether the devices fit the technical definition of a machine gun, something long banned under federal law, finding they do not in a divided 6-3 ruling today, with Justice Thomas writing even with a bump stock, a semi-automatic rifle will fire only one shot for every function of the trigger. But Justice Sotomayor in dissent finding bump stocks functionally equivalent to a machine gun, writing, "When I see a bird that walks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, I call that bird a duck." Some lawful gun owners like Jeremiah Cottle, who invented the bump stock, had argued the prior administration simply overstepped its authority.
The president doesn't get to make law that Congress does.
Tonight, the White
That's
House calling on Congress to ban the device.
What the court did today is really rolling back what otherwise is important progress to be made.
That is the other aspect of this, is in spite of the fact that even Congress doing so would be unconstitutional, yes, they do make the laws. It doesn't come from the Department of the ATF. I cannot think of the name of the case that's going on there limiting executive branch authority on this. Oh, what is it? I know it has to do with an energy company. It starts with an E, and I can't think of it right offhand. But there's actually another court that's going, another case that's going to the Supreme Court, discussing how to limit the power of federal agencies. Specifically. So that is where they are with that. But that didn't stop Democrats from making commentary on this, of course. Because, that's what they do. Senator Murphy says Supreme Court is ready to fundamentally rewrite the Second Amendment after bump stock ruling. No, that's not what's happening. From Avery Lotz. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, Democrat, said Sunday the Supreme Court is readying to fundamentally rewrite the Second Amendment after striking down a federal ban on bump stocks. Recent gun-related rulings from the High Court, Murphy told CNN's Jake Tapper on State of Disunion, signal it's prepared to take away permanently the ability of Congress to do simple things like require people to go through background checks or move forward on taking dangerous weapons like the AR-15 off the streets. Yes. Where's my yes, Chad meme? Hold on. We're going to put that right on the screen for you on the audio platform. You won't get to see it, but yeah, here's what I have to say to you, Chris Murphy. Yes, we do want to curtail you from that. So I think this court is poised to make it very hard for Congress or state legislatures to be able to regulate guns and keep our communities and schools safe, he says with an appeal to an emotion. that has no basis in the Constitution. So, I turn around and give you the same response. Yes. They're not rewriting the Second Amendment. They're just upholding it. Got one from CBS, but I've got to... There we go. I'll fix it next time. See, they only made me do one refresh. NBC, what the fuck is your problem? But I do have to remember to start actually archiving some of these again. Because I know which media outlets block you if you have an ad blocker on. I know it full well. Mogwai with the same meme there. Mog did it, yup. I put those emotes in there for a reason. And I'm glad they're getting used. Alright, Schumer. We'll be talking about later and things that I hate. To bring up a vote on gun bump stocks ban after Supreme Court decision. So the legislature is actually going to legislate. They're not going to get anywhere off this because they can't get it past the House. But they're going to do the thing that they refused to do for Roe for 50 years. And instead campaign on the fact that if you let Republicans win, the Supreme Court's going to chain you to the stove. Senate Majority Leader Chuck U. Schumer announced on Sunday that he plans to bring up a vote this week on restoring a ban on bump stocks, devices that greatly increase the rate of fire for semi-auto weapons after the Supreme Court invalidated a federal rule that outlawed the device days ago. Calling the Supreme Court a mega court and saying they've gone off the edges of the far right yet again, Schumer said Sunday in a news conference he plans to bring up a vote on restoring the bump stock ban under unanimous consent. Hold on. Oh wait, you're serious. Let me laugh even harder. Which could be blocked by opposition from just a single lawmaker. Schumer called the ban common sense, saying the Senate can help restore the public safety rule, while urging Republicans to join him to protect the American people. President Biden called on Congress to pass legislation on bump stock bans after the Supreme Court decision on Friday, vowing to sign a bill into law should it reach his desk, which it won't. So we have that. Jasmine Crockett over on the House side. How did that go again? Bleach, blonde, bad bitch body. How is it? I think I'm missing a step in there. That's what it was. Bleach, blonde, bad built butch body. That's that lady. Crockett calls Thomas corrupt after Supreme Court decision to upend bump stocks ban from Yash Roy. Jasmine Crockett slammed the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas as corrupt during an interview with MSDNC on the court's recent decision to overturn Trump-era bump stock ban. Thomas has come under increasing scrutiny for gifts he received from Republican super donors, including Harlan Crow. But again, you don't have an enforcement measure to this, so this is all talk. I would consider Bader Ginsburg and Stevens to have been corrupt. But we couldn't do anything about it. They were lifetime appointments. The Mogwai says, bleach blonde, bad built butch body is going to be my fantasy football team name. Just saying, just saying. Well, I'm going to have to join a different league than you then, because I'm probably going to use that as well. I got to find a fantasy football league. Now that I only work 40 hours a week. Y'all were too nice before, Crockett said during an interview with Melissa Murray. Clarence Thomas is corrupt, end of story. No one gets this kind of money and isn't influenced in any way. There will be a reckoning on November 5th, she added. Earlier this week, Dick Durbin released information showing that Thomas did not disclose information on 3 trips that he took that were funded by Crow. The report noted that Thomas had received nearly $4.2 million, which far exceeds gifts received by any other judge that we know of course. Because I'm sure that Planned Parenthood has given plenty to Sotomayor, Kagan, Ginsburg. Probably not so much to Jackson, because she's new. And speaking of enforcement for this, from the Hill. Ocasio-Cortez, Raskin to introduce legislation to rein in a fundamentally unaccountable and rogue Supreme Court. Which, a reminder by the way, will not get past the House. And does require a constitutional amendment to overcome separation of powers that are enshrined in Article 4 of the Constitution. The Honorable and Venerable Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Chavez and Jamie Raskin said on Tuesday they will introduce legislation in response to the increased ethics concerns related to the Supreme Court. Raskin and Chavez, who serve as the ranking and vice-ranking members respectively on the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, were part of a committee roundtable on Tuesday regarding these concerns. They explored various avenues for holding Supreme Court justices accountable, they told MSDNC anchor Chris Hayes. And so, Papi, it's not even a question of if Congress's jurisdiction and power over the Supreme Court, okay, Papi? It is. Oh, baby girl, what power are we going to exercise in order to rein in a fundamentally unaccountable and rogue court, okay, Papi? And by that, of course, it means a court that's not doing what Democrats want it to do. Congressman Raskin and myself will be introducing forthcoming legislation to even have Supreme Court subject to the same $50 gift rule that he and I are subject to, as everyone else who are members of Congress, she added later. A rule that nobody in Congress actually abides by, of course. Again, it's not going to go anywhere because of Article 4. But it'll be interesting to see what the text is at the very least. That pesky Constitution, that keeps you from doing all the things that you want. Alright, immediately after the bump stock ban, of course, police search for motive after apparent random shooting at Michigan Recreation Center wounds at least 9. The day the bump stock ban goes away, we have a mass shooting. You couldn't have timed that better. Unless you were planning something, of course. From Dahlia Fahid, Paradise Afshar, Sarah Smart, Kim Berryman, and Sharif Paget. Police are looking for a motive after at least 9 people were shot in what appears to be a random shooting that sent panicked families fleeing a crowded recreation area in Rochester Hills, Michigan on Saturday afternoon. Police on Sunday identified the gunman as Michael William Nash, 42, from Shelby Township. He pulled up on the Brooklands Plaza splash pad, left a vehicle, opened fire from roughly 20 feet away, reloading multiple times. Oakland County Sheriff Michael Bouchard said on Saturday the suspect fired potentially 28 times, the sheriff said. They're showing me pictures of the sheriff. Nothing on the shooter. Under no circumstance is it normal for ice cream cones and flip-flops to be strewn amongst blood and bullet casings, said Rep. John James at a news conference on Saturday night. The shooting took place during a particularly violent weekend in America, where 2 people were killed and 14 others were injured in shooting at a Juneteenth celebration in Texas, and 7 were shot at car meetup in Massachusetts. And ironically, again, also on the exact same day that the bump stock ban was overturned. Nash, the suspect in the Michigan shooting, was found dead with an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Oh, really? At the home he shared with his mother. After police tracked the weapon from the shooting to an address around a half mile from the crime scene, Bouchard said police found a rifle on the kitchen table. Nash didn't have any previous police contact or criminal record, according to Bouchard. Okay. So let me see if I can recap this. No description of the shooter. We have a name. No motive. Never had any police contact, according to this article itself. No criminal record whatsoever. And he just randomly grabs a gun, goes and shoots something, and then mysteriously shoots himself. I have questions. Alright. Let's move on to some more political news. I want to get some foreign stuff here before we go today. From the New York Post, Biden appears to freeze up, has to be led off stage by Obama at Megabucks LA fundraiser. From Chris Nessie. I'm going to actually go back on this. This was from yesterday in the morning. Let's pop this open and scroll back into Mr. Gardner's profile. 8 hours. Huh, that's the X right there. So let's read the article and then we'll watch the video. President Biden appeared to freeze up on a stage and had to be led off by Barack Obama at the conclusion of a star-studded campaign fundraiser in LA Saturday night. The awkward moment took place after Biden and his predecessor sat for a 45-minute interview with late-night host Jimmy Kimmel at the Peacock Theater. As the men stood for applause, Biden's gaze seemed to become fixed on the crowd for a full 10 seconds, until former President Barack Obama took his wrist and led him off stage. The incident follows a spate of caught-on-camera moments where Biden appears dazed or confused. Well, he is dazed and confused about where he was, including when he appeared to wander off at the G7 summit in Apulia, Italy during a parachute exhibition. Alright, as I always say, let's watch and you decide. You guys have no idea how much I want to be wrong about this. Because I don't love the idea of the fact that a person with Alzheimer's has the nuclear football. I want so bad to be wrong about this. I don't know if I can. You guys... It seems to be happening more and more. Now, the page shills are running the spin of the fact that he just paused to soak in all the adulation and applause. But see, the people on the other side of him were still waving and clapping and everything else. The guy just froze up, and then Barack comes in and says, "Hey, Joe, hey, you remember when I had to lead you around when I was president? Hey, yep, follow me. Come off the stage, man." I don't know, man. I can see where they're coming from off of this, but it keeps happening over and over again, man. On to the potential Trump admin, which I will give the man credit. He is actually starting to come in and make policy suggestions. He's still talking about January the 6th and then election of 2020, but he is making policy suggestions. Leading reporting breaking. Trump allegedly floated the concept of eliminating the income tax and replacing it with tariffs at the GOP meeting in the Capitol Hill Club. Now, important note to this. I am fully in favor of this because I'd like to see more stuff get made domestically and less stuff coming in imported from overseas. I'd love to see more of that. And the fees to bring things in from overseas being paid to the federal government. I'd like to see more of that. Yes, some of that's going to get passed along to the customer, incentivizing more job growth to be made here and more stuff to be made in its final form here. Or even raw materials coming from our country. And also, full disclosure on this, this is how our government was funded until World War II. That's how our federal government was funded. It was a combination of taxes that were levied against the states themselves, not directly to the American people. So they just had to come back out and decide how to levy, to get the revenue from their people in order to pay to the government, and tariffs. With the bloat of the federal government now, we would have to take a significant amount of machete to the bureaucracy, to the federal judiciary, and to other aspects of the federal government before we could even dream to go back to this. All things that I'm in favor of, by the way, but all things that this man, who you see on your screen, and if you're listening on the audio platform, that would be one Donald John Trump, failed to do in his first term. So you can understand my skepticism on whether or not he would actually do the things that needed to be done in order to make us fundable by tariffs again. You can understand where I'd be skeptical from that. Why are they having a Juneteenth celebration not on Juneteenth? Because they wanted to have it on the weekend. Yeah, Palm doesn't work on Wednesday. I do. Mog says that one's a stretch. The freeze up. What's with all these politicians freezing up? Can we not have the bots that don't buffer like real audio in 1998? The G7 one I can see, this one's a stretch. You'll see the income tax go away about the same time the sun goes red giant. Again, given the size of our federal bureaucracy, yes, I actually believe that. From Newsweek, warnings issued over Trump's income tax plans. From Julia Carbonaro, Trump's idea to eliminate the federal income tax by creating an all-tariff policy should he win the November election would likely further burden lower and middle income Americans, an expert told Newsweek, while favoring higher income individuals. Well, yes, because it's going to hit the cheap stuff that comes from China, which they're going to pass that cost on to Walmart and Amazon. The embattled former president and Republican presidential candidate reportedly floated the idea during a private meeting last week, sources told CNBC, which first reported on the story addressing Republican lawmakers at the Capitol Hill Club in Washington, D.C. On June 13th, Trump talked about imposing an all-tariff policy that would ultimately allow the country to eliminate the income tax entirely, while also suggesting using tariffs as leverage during negotiations with bad actors. Now, see, that part I actually agree with. But you will have to do so many cuts to the bureaucracy, which, again, in favor of right here. That's a thing that I love. But something that I don't think that even Trump has the political balls to do. Asaf Harpaz, an assistant professor at the University of Georgia Law School of Law, told Newsweek that replacing the federal income tax with an all-tariff policy suggested by Trump is an idea that raises several practical and theoretical questions. In addition to the legislative task of overhauling the Internal Revenue Code, it's difficult to envision how tariffs could completely replace the revenue from federal income taxes, Harpaz told Newsweek. In 2023, the federal government collected over $2 trillion from individual income taxes alone, he explained. Moreover, foreign governments may levy punitive tariffs in response to the policy, like we should be doing on them. And increased costs will presumably roll over to individual taxpayers. That, for Harpaz, is the biggest issue, and he is correct on that. That is something you'd have to overcome. Again, the solution would be to incentivize more people to buy American at that point. But with the way that our wage structure is set up, especially, and price structure and union fees for buying American are all set up, that would still fall to lower income Americans who'd either have to shell out more money for American or shell out more money to Walmart for the cheap Chinese crap that's now more expensive because of the tariff. Again, outside of the idea that, hey, we've actually got to slash costs in order to do that because, where are we going to get $2 trillion from when a lot of the countries we import from don't have that kind of money to begin with? I'm in favor of this idea. I just don't see it able to be done in practice without very, very, very harsh cuts to things. Call me crazy, though. I'd like to see how the idiot gets it done as well. If at all. Yellen getting some of this as well. Treasury Secretary Yellen knocks Trump after he proposes replacing income tax with tariffs. From Maya Homan. Janet Yellen criticized former President Trump after he floated replacing at least parts of U.S. income taxes with higher tariffs on imported goods. Trump outlined the proposal during a Thursday visit to Capitol Hill, where he met with Republican lawmakers and tried to unify GOP leaders ahead of the July convention, according to Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene. But Yellen, during an appearance on ABC's This Week, immediately rejected the potential economic plan. By the way, $2 trillion that the American taxpayer could be putting into private industry or savings or a host of other things. $2 trillion. Let that number sink in for just a second. Donald Trump floated the idea of replacing all federal income taxes with high tariffs. Jonathan Karl said, "Anyway, that's remotely feasible. It would require tariffs well over 100%, Yellen responded. The impact would be to make life unaffordable for working-class Americans that would harm American businesses." Some political observers pointed out Trump's suggestion about U.S. tariffs and income taxes come as Biden's appeal among voters without college degrees or living in households earning $50,000 a year or less has fallen. Tariffs also are a significant part of Trump's economic approach as president, and he enacted tariffs of up to 25% on many imported Chinese goods during his time in office. Three words that I never thought that I would say out loud in my life. But Janet Yellen is right. Holy fuck, that was painful to say. And like I was explaining at the top of this, yes, you would need to slash significant parts of the federal government to next to zero in order to actually get away with this. And I don't think he's got the balls. But Yellen on with her own set of issues, of course. Yellen is grilled on voters' satisfaction with economy under Biden, from Daniel Chayton. Janet Yellen was pressed on Sunday to answer why voters are unhappy with the economy under President Biden, just months ahead of his expected rematch against former President Trump. Let me see if there is video off this one. No, there isn't. Jonathan Karl, a co-anchor of ABC News' This Week, set up the question by telling Yellen that that she had cited a lot of positive macroeconomic indicators while commenting on the economic situation in the U.S. The rate of inflation is coming down, unemployment is low, the economy is growing, inflation is not coming down, by the way. But why is it that voters seem so unsatisfied? Carl asked. And in fact, in poll after poll, voters say they trust Trump with the economy more than Biden. What's going on? Well, I think the pandemic was a profoundly difficult time, Yellen replied. But in the years leading up to the pandemic, Americans were really, many of them, working class families, just struggling with things like healthcare costs, the cost of energy, education costs, and childcare costs. She added, and they really feel the cost of living. Housing is particularly unaffordable in so many parts of the country. We will be talking about that at the close of the show, and I think the inflation we experienced after the pandemic just compounded this feeling for them that life isn't affordable. So it's the Biden admin's top priority to address these costs where we possibly can. Carla interjected to focus on inflation. Yeah, and just to be clear, I mean, the rate of inflation is coming down, but overall inflation is up 19% since Biden took office, Carl said. On some everyday goods, it's much higher. The price of eggs is up 84%. Since Biden took office, ground beef is up 30%, bread is up 27%. I mean, by and large, the inflation rate may go down, but those prices aren't returning to where they were. I mean, those prices aren't going to remain high. So, good on Jonathan Karl for at least pushing back on a Biden admin official. Apparently that didn't archive, whatever it was. We'll have to figure that one out. So we'll move on from that one. We'll go to the border from Newsweek. New York threat extremely serious, official warns as ISIS crosses the border. From Isla Slisco. New York is facing an extremely serious terrorism threat following the arrest of 8 Tajik nationals with suspected ties to ISIS, according to the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey Security Chief Greg Erie. Reports emerged earlier this week that 8 men originating from Tajikistan, who may be associated with ISIS Khorasan or ISIS-K, have been arrested in New York, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles after illegally entering the country through the U.S.-Mexico border. Erie, who investigated terror threats for the FBI prior to joining the Port Authority, said during an appearance on CNN's Aaron Burnett Out Front that the arrest suggests the terrorist attack could be coming. Well, see, and the concern of that is, and our paid shills friends are going to come out and tell us that, well, the Biden admin is doing its job. They got arrested, don't you know? Here's the concern that I have, and this is the same thing that goes when they say apprehensions are up at the border. And some of that comes from the fact that volume is up. The Border Patrol is not any better at doing its job. It's a federal agency. It's a bureaucracy. Doesn't matter who the president is. They're not doing their job to the extent that they need to be doing. And when you see border crossings go up, as you see in this, how many more people do you think got through that didn't get caught? And furthermore, you found 8, good job, in various parts around New York. How many didn't you catch? Because they were already far, far away from the border and planning and making a life for themselves in these states. How many more are out there that didn't get caught across the border? Because none of them apparently got caught across the border. They were presumably doing something else in these northern states. The New York Post reports pressure mounts on Biden admin to issue national terrorism alert after arrest of suspected ISIS-tied border crossers. Former Homeland Security officials are slamming the Biden admin for failing to issue a national terror threat bulletin over a year, despite a string of serious potential terror threats stemming from the southern border. An arrest of 8 individuals from Tajikistan, believed to have links to ISIS-K, in addition to several accidental, I can read today, releases of migrants whose names appear on the terror watch list should be enough to alert the public to a terrorist threat, the former Department of Homeland Security officials told the Post. Look, here's the deal. It shouldn't be dependent on the government to issue this threat to you. You should be paying attention to this as it goes. Got a piece from Florida man, Ron DeSantis, on this. Florida man responds to 8 ISIS terrorist suspects who illegally entered the U.S. through Mexico border, from Ryan Saavedra. Florida man Ron DeSantis blasted the New York Times this week after he was again proven correct over remarks he made late last year about terrorists entering the U.S. through the southern border. ICE officials arrested 8 ISIS terrorist suspects over the weekend in New York City, LA, and Philadelphia after they illegally entered the U.S. The New York Post reported that the investigation that led to their arrest featured a wiretap which revealed one of the now arrested individuals was talking about bombs. If you look at the threats we face, terrorists have come in through our southern border, DeSantis said. New York Times blogger Eileen Sullivan claimed that in a fact check of DeSantis' statement, this is false. Since 1975, no one's been killed or injured in a terrorist attack in the U.S. that involved someone who came across the border illegally. She wrote in her fact check of something that the governor didn't even say. Wow. Florida man responded to the news and the fact checking during a Fox News segment this week. I said this last fall that even if it wasn't just me spitballing, Biden's own DHS has acknowledged that there were hundreds of people on the terror watch list. He said, "You can't have 10 million people come and not have potential terrorists come across the border, especially when we have people from the Middle East."
The New York Times fact-checked you, didn't they? And they fact-checked you on the issue of whether or not terrorists were crossing the border under Joe Biden's open border policies, unvetted illegal immigrants from our top geopolitical foes. I've mentioned the list of countries over and over. I think they owe you an apology, Governor.
Yeah, I mean, I said this last fall that, and it wasn't even just me spitballing. Biden's own DHS has acknowledged there were hundreds of people on the terror watch list. Sean, you can't have 10 million people come and not have potential terrorists come across the border, especially when we have people from the Middle East. So now we know without a shadow of a doubt that we have ISIS folks who've been identified and apprehended. The New York Times was wrong. The New York Times was pushing forth a narrative. They were running interference for Joe Biden. What I said was correct at the time, and it remains correct today. But I am not going to hold my breath asking for an apology. I think a lot of these corporate media outlets, it's drive-by journalism. They say what they want, and then they just forget about when it's obvious they were wrong.
Well said, Governor. Alright, what else do we have? I know we're running close on time here. I gotta call my mom back. Some polling news. We'll do a little bit of reaction to the Biden admin. Guy Benson Xing out that Iowa poll is definitely a wow and can't be easily dismissed as a weird outlier. Let's listen.
Trump at 50% in Iowa is not that much of a shock. He won the state comfortably in 2016 and 2020, 8 or 9 points. Joe Biden at 32%, the incumbent president, in what has been a swing state not that long ago. That's the eye popper, an 18-point margin, because Trump is strong. He's got the bare majority, but the incumbent has less than 1/3 support in that state, which is an astounding number. And you might say, well, this is a weird outlier. We haven't seen anything really close to that. But I would point out this is considered the gold standard poll in the state of Iowa. It's a woman, Ann Seltzer, who runs it, and she almost nailed Trump's margin in the last 2 elections in Iowa. In fact, Trump barely outperformed her poll, just a little bit. So if he's even in the ballpark of up 18 points in a state like Iowa, the story isn't Iowa. The story is Minnesota to the north, Wisconsin in the neighborhood. If he's got that kind of margin there and she's tracking that correctly, the Democrats have to be very worried about the upper Midwest in general.
So, recent poll came out, and it's considered to be the gold standard, per the Daily Wire. Gold standard poll, a bad omen for Biden in Midwestern states, from Daniel Chayton. What's widely regarded as a gold standard poll in Iowa touched off a swirl of commentary on Monday about how it portends a poor showing for President Biden in battleground states across the Midwest. A new Des Moines Register Mediacom Iowa poll from J. Ann Seltzer's company, Seltzer & Company, found that former President Trump got 50% support among likely voters, 18 points ahead of Biden's independent candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who received 9% support. The findings from the new poll, which also showed Trump increasing his lead since his conviction in hush money trial, and Biden with a net approval rating of -39 in June, prompted a discussion on social media. In 2020, Trump won Iowa by +8 points. Frank Luntz said on X, in response to the results, now Iowa's best pollster shows him up +18 in the state, which is bad news for Biden in more competitive Midwestern states like Wisconsin and Michigan. And yes, even now they're saying Minnesota could be in play, which, I mean, for me, for Minnesota to be in play for a Republican, given the fact that Minnesota was the only state that went for Mondale in 1984, tells me we've got something going on here. Now, I'm on Real Clear Politics right now because, well, I always take the aggregate. I don't take these, I don't take individual polls. But yes, this is the one they're talking about, and this is with Kennedy and Chase Oliver. Iowa. Trump versus Biden versus Kennedy versus Oliver. Trump +18. Let's look at the aggregate for this race. There is no aggregate for this race. So that's all that we have for this one right now. Let's see if I've got an Iowa Trump only. Or Trump Biden only. I don't, but I mean, you can see some of these individual polls as well coming up through here. Biden job approval, disapprove +9. In a new Rasmussen poll, Arizona, Trump +7. Arizona with Weston Stein, Trump +4. Trump versus Biden, Utah, Trump +32. That's not surprising at all. Pennsylvania, Trump over everybody, +2 in Pennsylvania, which is a swing state that he never led in the polls otherwise in 2020 or 2016. Let's just do a general. Let's grab and see what the polls are saying in aggregate for that. We have a general election one. General, Trump versus Biden with the Reuters Ipsos of Trump +2. The aggregate is still +0.8 across all the recent polls. And it looks like the margin is starting to widen out again, so we'll see what happens with that. What else do we have? A little bit more. Detroit faith leader. President Trump, I'm so humbled that you would be here. Obama never came to the hood, so to speak. Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood, so thank you.
President Trump, I'm so humbled that you would be here. President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. Very humble, really nice. Thank you. My honor.
President Trump, I'm so humbled.
I know he's not making huge waves in the black vote, but I do think that some of the black vote is starting to realize how people like the Bidens and the Obamas and the Clintons actually think about them. And realistically, statistically, it only takes a couple of points in that demographic to shift the entire election. So we will see what happens with that. Tale of two directions. Jack Black with emphatic endorsement of Joe Biden. Look, I have never found a celebrity opinion of a politician that has swayed my opinion one way or the other for them. And I'm just going to say that right off the bat. But let's hear what Jack Black has to say about this one.
A few days ago, my manager called me and said George Clooney and Julia Roberts wanted me to help out the president and speak here tonight. And I said, I am in. When and where? And thank you. And then they said, Jack, we know how busy you are. You don't have time. Look at all the other events that are happening tonight that you already turned down. MC at the Fliegelman Bat Mitzvah. The opening of the new Jack in the Box in Oxnard. Judge at the second annual Imperial Valley Avocado Festival. You don't see that on Meryl Streep's resume. I said, I know I turned them down, but my president needs me. Thank you. And then they hit me with the big one. They said, Jack, you can't go. You have nothing to wear. Your good suit is in the cleaners. Well, were they wrong? Because I had this to wear. My kick-ass American flag overalls. Most patriotic outfit of all times. That shut him up. There wasn't much he could say after that. And when the president wins in November... Yeah! I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get a sweet shout out in his victory speech for what I gave up to be here. Because when democracy is at stake, Jack Black answers the call. Mr. President, you're welcome. That's not the president, that's not Judge, it's a random dude. But I thought it would look better if I talked right to a guy.
There is no celebrity endorsement that has ever persuaded me to vote for a candidate one way or another. There have been celebrity endorsements that have persuaded me away from candidates. And I still like Jack Black's movies. I'm not going to deny him the talent that he has. I just don't care what he thinks about politics. Plain and simple. On the other side, from presumably an actual working class American, I'm so sick of this admin. I'm 23 years old. I'm ready to buy a house and start putting my roots down. But I have to stick to renting because the housing market is ridiculous. Vote for the convicted felon. This shit is getting old. There was another discussion off this. I don't want to get too far into it because we're up on the clock. And I know that my mom texted me right as I was starting to talk on the cold open. So it sounds like she's wanting a call back at some here. So I don't want to stay on here too long. But what I will say is this. The housing market will probably pop if Trump becomes president. And it's going to be disastrous economically for a lot of people. But the alternative is to keep the prices up so high that nobody can even attain the houses. Because when you've got 20 million extra people that are fighting for the same houses, yes, of course the demand is going to go up. So that is what we have for that. Brief one here. Again, going to touch on this one, but not the women in the Selective Service, because I was not able to find a Green Check verified article for that. House passes defense bill automatically registering men 18 to 26 for the draft. What this means is you don't get to be a draft dodger anymore. As soon as the Census Bureau determines that you have turned 18 by your birth date in the system, verified against your birth certificate, you're automatically in the draft. Now you could go out and get a deferment based on the fact that you've got bone spurs or mental disorder or your brain's trying to escape from your head. You can get all kinds of deferments for that. And probably get out of the draft for that still, or age at some point here. But it's taken away a choice. Now, mind you, again, this hasn't passed the Senate and this hasn't gone to the president's desk yet, but it's taken away your choice and your choice to dissent. So I am against this. Now, again, allegedly, also this is going to involve women. I don't know, and again, I have not been able to find any verification for this, but let's read here. The House passed a measure on Friday automatically registering men aged 18 to 26 for selective service. It was part of the NDAA, which sets out the U.S. government's military and national security priorities over the next fiscal year. This year's NDAA authorizes $895.2 billion in military spending, a $9 billion increase from fiscal 2024. Thank you, military-industrial complex. While it hasn't been invoked for over half a century, it's mandatory for all male U.S. citizens to register for the selective service, also known as the draft. When they turn 18, failure to register is classified as a felony and comes with a host of legal challenges. Supporters of the amendment argue that it would cut down on bureaucratic red tape and help U.S. citizens avoid unnecessary legal issues, as well as cutting down on the taxpayer dollars going towards prosecuting those cases. It was led by Rep. Chrissy Houlihan and passed in the House Armed Services Committee's version of the NDAA in May. The NDAA advanced through the committee in an overwhelming 57-1 vote. By using available federal databases, which is code for they're going to spy on you, the selective service will be able to register all the individuals required and thus help ensure any future military draft is fair and equitable, Houlihan said during the debate last month, according to Defense News. Being anti-war, I can tell you it's probably not going to surprise you that I'm against the draft. And the fact that they're pushing so hard for this does kind of question to me what it is that may be coming down the pipes, potentially before Election Day. We will see. A little bit of foreign news before we do the outro and head out of here. Putin offers truce if Ukraine exits Russian-claimed areas and drops NATO bid. Kiev rejected it. From Dasha Litvinova. Russian President Vladimir Putin promised Friday to immediately order a ceasefire in Ukraine and start negotiations if Kiev began withdrawing troops from the 4 regions annexed by Moscow in 2022 and renounced plans to join NATO. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky rejected what he called the ultimatum by Putin to surrender more territory. Putin's remarks came as Switzerland prepares to host scores of world leaders, but not from Moscow this weekend, to try to map out the first steps towards peace in Ukraine. They also coincided with a meeting of leaders from the G7 in Italy after the US and Ukraine this week signed a 10-year security agreement that Russian officials, including Putin, denounced as null and void. Putin blasted the Switzerland conference as just another ploy to divert everyone's attention, reverse the cause and effect of the Ukrainian crisis, and set the discussion on the wrong track. His demands came in a speech at the Russian Foreign Ministry and was aimed at what he called the final resolution of the conflict rather than freezing it, and stressed the Kremlin is ready to start negotiating without delay. I would be interested to see what Zelensky said if they took the NATO side out of this. Do I want to see the Ukraine in NATO? I do not. Because as embattled as the territory is, that would pull us into a war, probably at some point within my lifetime. But if you pulled that bit out, I wonder what Zelensky would say, because that seems to be what was at the center of all this to begin with, was putting NATO at Russia's front door, in spite of the fact that they already are in Finland. I know we got to do something different here. Because Zelensky is sending older men and now women to the meat grinder as well. And if he keeps going on at the rate that he's going, he will be sitting and ruling over an empty kingdom at some point. But I also find it interesting that Zelensky is the one that rejects. From the BBC, Putin peace terms slammed at Ukraine summit from Sarah Rainsford. And Dear Baal Jordan. The leaders of Italy and Germany have strongly rejected ceasefire terms laid out by Putin to stop the war in Ukraine, as scores of countries gathered at a 2-day summit in Switzerland to discuss ending the conflict. Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, called the Russian president's plan propaganda, which effectively suggested that Ukraine must withdraw from Ukraine. Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany dismissed it as dictatorial peace. A draft declaration issued at the summit reaffirms Ukraine's territorial integrity and unambiguously rejects any nuclear threat against the country. On Friday, Mr. Putin claimed that he would agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine if they withdrew troops from the 4 regions, the Donbas region and Crimea, of course, which Russia partially occupies and claims to have annexed. Andrei Yermak, chief of staff to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, told the BBC at the Swiss summit that there would be no compromise on independent sovereignty or territorial integrity. For those of you who are new here, I will make my beliefs on the conflict in the Ukraine clear as this. I don't believe that what's happening in the Ukraine is what's been presented to us. And I never have. What it's always looked like to me, especially given the fact, and I can pull the map back up to remind you what this all looks like. Open in maps. Let's bring this over here. That Russia went in through this region up to the Dnipro River and didn't really stop after that. Kharkiv, Dnipro, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson seemed to be the limits of what it was they were looking for, plus Crimea. And I've always found that important because, a reminder, if Russia wanted to take the Ukraine as a whole, they would station troops from Azir to Gomel in Belarus, which is a puppet state to Russia, run down the Dnipro through relatively flat land and capture Kiev and be done with it. This is extremely mountainous terrain, and this is a slog to get through if your intent is to go to Kiev when you have a puppet state right here. My belief, judging by the military advances of Russia going through the region, is that the Donetsk and the Luhansk regions in the Donbas region, the territories over on this side of the Ukraine, which were ethnically Russian and had filed for independence from Kiev, preferring the Russian lifestyle, were told no by Kiev, and then they petitioned Moscow for help in declaring independence from the Ukraine. Because from somebody who's played hours upon hours of StarCraft and other military RTSs, that's the only thing that makes sense to me. We will find out what happened probably in 20 years. On the other major conflict going on right now, from Reuters, Hamas response to Gaza ceasefire proposal consistent with principles of U.S. plan, leader says. From Reuters, Hamas's response to the latest Gaza ceasefire proposal is consistent with principles put forward in U.S. President Biden's plan, the group's Qatar-based leader Ismail Haniyeh said in a televised speech on the occasion of the Islamic Eid al-Adha on Sunday. Hamas and the Palestinian groups are ready for a comprehensive deal, which entails a ceasefire, withdrawal from the Strip, and reconstruction of what was destroyed in a comprehensive swap deal, Hania said, referring to the exchange of Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners. Egypt and Qatar, which along with the U.S. have been mediating between Hamas and Israel, and said on June 11th they received a response from Palestinian groups to the U.S. plan without giving any further details. Rumors, but nothing proven at this point, but it appears that by the rumor mill, Israel has rejected this as well. I will not push any further on that because I don't have the green check verification to that, but this will be interesting to watch and see if this is resolved by election time or if this pops off with a bigger situation. Eid. Eid is how that's pronounced. Alright, that's all the news that I have for the day. I'm going to drop this over here. We'll kill that window. But of course, as we always do, we're going to close off the show with the Ferengi rules of acquisition and things that I like and things that I hate. And we're going to end on things that I hate because I'm a glutton for punishment. I always find it funny because Quest Fanning says, why don't you end on things that you love? I said, well, because I've just been slogging through things that I hate and I need a buffer at this point. But first, the rules of acquisition. New viewers to the program will remember that we actually finished this once, but it was requested that I go start over from the top. The rules of acquisition outline the commandments of the Ferengi religion of hypercapitalism. Following these rules to a T ensures you a place in the divine treasury after you die, where you can take the social credit that you have gained from following these rules of acquisition to a T and use them to bid on another life. I actually can't wait till Palm and I get actually into Deep Space Nine and start getting into some of the controversial stuff with this, especially with the rules of acquisition. But we always try to watch it at like 10 o'clock at night, and she falls asleep, and then about 5 minutes later I fall asleep. We've made it 15 minutes into Emissary, the pilot episode. But it's something I'm eager to share with her, as we do with the rules of acquisition. So, reading into these rules, every week we read one of the rules, look at how it was used in programming, and how we can use it in real life, if possible. Remember, Roddenberry was an avowed communist and hated capitalism. Part of the reason that some of these rules were so comical. Alright, we did the third rule of acquisition last week. Never spend more for an acquisition than you have to. Jesus, I was looking over at myself. I'm like, what's going on here? Oh yeah, that's right. I had the Restream monitor on, and that's still showing the top of the show. I'm like, wait a sec, did something screw up over here? Nope, it didn't. Let's get the Rumble chat back up here. And then we will read the fourth rule of acquisition. Sedition and treason are always profitable. From the Star Trek video game, Star Trek Online. Now, when we look at sedition and treason, we look at a situation where, yes, typically if you're committing treason or sedition, you have knowledge that your original government wants. Why are these always profitable? Because knowledge is power, and power is money. I don't agree with this sentiment, because typically when you're doing sedition and treason and giving information like this, you're getting innocent people killed. But I can understand where they come from for this as well, because it is profitable to come back and do so. And we always push for the maximum amount of profit. So, that is your fourth rule of acquisition. Let's move on to a couple things that I like and a couple things that I hate. And we might have to go and do the fifth rule twice in a row, because I think I just did the fourth one twice in a row. I think I did the fourth one last week. Alright, thing I like, number one, country star George Strait breaks concert attendance record at Texas show. You know, for a guy who's been retired for 15 years, this guy is sure putting on a lot of concerts still. Which I enjoy because, I mean, he loves to do it. But we have for that from Amanda Harding, Taylor Who. Country star George Strait just broke the attendance record for the largest concert in the U.S. during a Saturday show at Kyle Field, located on the campus of A&M University in College Station. Parker McCollum and Katie Offerman appeared at the show as special guests. "What's going on, everyone?" the 72-year-old recording artist said to his fans assembled at the home of the Texas A&M Aggies football team. "We got some Aggies out there. Oh yeah, I'm ashamed to say this, but this is my first time ever in Kyle Field. Damn. Just invite me back, I'll come." His weekend show attracted 110,905 ticket-buying fans, besting the record previously set by the Grateful Dead. Their 77 show at Raceway Park in Jersey attracted 107,019 people. Straight's latest record-breaking numbers also applied to the Texas A&M Kyle Field, specifically as it beat out the 2014 college football game against Ole Miss, which attracted 110,633 attendees per billboard. There were several prominent faces in the crowd, including Greg Abbott. Unbelievable concert by the King. George Strait, he shared on X. Largest packed house for a concert in America ever. Look, I like George Strait. I like his music. I have for a long time. And it's enjoyable to see, in spite of pop being the preferred genre for most people. To see records like this still being set by somebody who is 72 years old, who has been putting music out since the 80s and is still beloved around the world. Kenny Chesney is almost breaking Straight's record for number ones. They are tied. That's interesting, because I know Strait had 50 as of 04. I'd have to look up and see where they're at. But then I also have to call my mom back. Other things that I like. As promised, somebody from the government agreeing with my sentiment on this. From the Daily Wire, New York rep calls on Governor Hochul to pardon Trump from Daniel Chayton. A House Republican from upstate New York is calling on her state's governor, Kathy Hochul, to pardon Trump after the former president was recently found guilty on all counts in a hush money trial. Claudia Tenney, a New York Bar Association member, made the request in a letter on Thursday that also urged Hochul to remove Bragg as a Manhattan DA, saying he failed to uphold the high ethical standards of his role. Bragg used a warped version of events to push a manufactured charge against Trump, a decision that was at best legally questionable, at worst criminal, Tenney wrote in the letter, which has been posted to her congressional website. Hochul has given no indication she's interested in dealing Trump a pardon as he seeks a second term in the White House. From the top, from the beginning, when I first heard about the charges coming down, one of the first suggestions that I made was the fact that if Hochul wants to win, and if Biden wants to win especially, Hochul will come down and say, "I hereby, with my power as governor, pardon you, Donald John Trump, for all your crimes, including future convictions, because I think Biden can beat you fair and square." Biden looks weak as hell, based on the fact that he has to rely on lawfare to hold Trump off the campaign trail. And I've always advised, and you don't interrupt your enemies when they're making a mistake, but I've advised from the beginning, the thing that would make Biden look the strongest as the strongest contender would be for him to be facing down Trump with no criminal charges or convictions against him. Dean Phillips says the same thing. The worst part is I think that Biden's still going to lose with one arm tied behind his back. Or with one arm tied behind Trump's back. But Biden will look so much stronger if they just quit the lawfare and let him run full throat. Dual Helix has joined us right at the end. You just missed the rules of acquisition, actually, and said it's a kangaroo court. one more thing that I like. This would have been on things that I hate, but he deleted it because he realized his wrong. Chuck U. Schumer deletes Father's Day photo tweet in front of grill after critics slam his spatula skills, from David Proper. Majority Leader Chuck U. Schumer was ready to man the grill on Father's Day, but it couldn't handle the heat when a slew of food critics on social media questioned his skills with the spatula and the patty. He has never cooked a day in his life. Let's be realistic about this. The Brooklyn-born senator initially posted a photo of 2x of himself in front of a grill with burger patties and hot dogs and an ear-to-ear smile. Our family has lived in an apartment building for all our years, but my daughter and wife just bought a house with a backyard, and for the first time we're having a barbecue with hot dogs and hamburgers on the grill, Schumer tweeted. Father's Day heaven. But commenters were quick to grill the New York legislature and wondered if a piece of cheese on a patty was placed there prematurely. So, what's in question here, of course, is the fact that, from here, and Palm pointed this on the picture, you can kind of see a little bit of flame under where the circle is on this. So it looks like the grill might actually be on, but he's got a piece of cheese on a raw burger, with the hot dogs on the other end as well. Now, a couple of different things here. Number one was the food sin, because you don't put the cheese on until after the burger is cooked. Anybody from Wisconsin can tell you that. Two, and this is the important part, Schumer is practicing and Jewish, which means that it's against rabbinic law for him to eat a product of the animal's lactation with the animal. They can eat cheese and they can eat burger, but they can't eat them together if they're using cow cheese. Now, if that's goat cheese, that's inadmissible. But I believe goat is a cloven hoof animal, so it's unclean as well, so he wouldn't be able to use goat's milk. I would have to check on that one. That might be a falsehood, but that would come from ignorance, not attempt to mislead. I will look in rabbinic law after that, after the show. And then, of course, he's also in New York City. His daughter bought a house with a backyard in New York City using a propane grill, which are illegal in New York City. So, a lot of stuff going on here. But he got roasted enough and he deleted that one. So, that's what we have for things that I like. Let's do a couple things that I hate. Now, I like... Oh, this was on things that I like, not things that I hate. I like the fact that this guy drug for this one. But I hate the fact that this guy was such a moron that he did this. This is kind of on the midst of it. Nico Delgado, I should say. Doing this everywhere I go in Detroit, no tax on tips. Because Trump has proposed no tax on tips anywhere. Now, you do have to report your tips. And every waitress and every waiter in the world reports the exact number of tips that they get every single time, I promise. But I don't think that they should. That's a cash exchange between person and customer. That should be exempt. Now, the included gratuity here, of course, that's the restaurant charging, so that should be, because they're pulling that and they're paying that the restaurant's revenue back to the server. But not Mersch. Quote X this and said, if you're going to politicize your tips, do better than this cheap fuck. Criticizing the $5 tip on the $17 meal. Now, the restaurant has included gratuity, which means that the tip on this is $7.49. On a $17.58 meal, that's a 42% tip. So I don't know how much not Mersch wants Delgado to tip, but he is well above what common parlance is, which is supposed to be about 20%. Couple more that I like. I am yes, you are no. X is out. Tell me you live in a diverse neighborhood without telling people you live in a diverse neighborhood. Now, I hate that fact that the cars are getting stolen, of course, and people are making reference to, let's just say it outright, the ghetto. But I like the way that this guy thinks as well, and I've seen somebody try to steal one of my vehicles that I let the keys in and couldn't do it because my truck was a stick. It was a 90S10 with a 5-speed manual, and the guy went in and turned the key a bunch of times, didn't know about the clutch safety switch, and, well, gave up after a little bit. But the note in the window says, this Kia cannot be started with a USB and a screwdriver. The security system has been updated and it will not work. In smaller text, this is a manual transmission. It is raining like hell out there. I hope there's not a tornado coming. I know they were talking about severe weather and I can hear the rain just pouring. And the last one, and you get what you deserve. Employees at the OCF Coffee House in Philadelphia have voted to unionize. 1 week later, all 3 stores closed down. Now they're protesting the closure. Let's watch the video. And I will give my opinion on why this is under things that I like.
Ori, you can't hide. We all see your greedy side.
Former employees of OCF Coffee House rallied outside of the now closed Fairmount Cafe on Tuesday.
We've been paid really bad wages, and this was our attempt to get better wages and make the place that we love better.
The coffee shops are owned by OCF Realty. The real estate brokerage announced the closures to employees in an email which included 2 other locations in South Philly. Workers like Alex Simpson say they were shocked.
I am pretty crushed, especially when it's such a blatant response to our union process. This comes a week after we publicly announced our union.
Ori, you can't hide. We all see your greedy side.
Here's the thing on unions. Number 1, I don't oppose people's ability to go and unionize. I'm a bad Republican for that, even though I'm not a Republican. If people want to get together, pool a bunch of money, and hire a lawyer, and then all quit if their favorite coworker gets fired, that's on them. When your union is paid by your company's payroll department, I have questions about that. I don't care for that one little bit. But also, when you're demanding the higher wages that your union's going to come out and fight for, your company's going to look at the balance sheet and say, hey, I can't do this anymore. And it's always a risk that you have, especially when you're unionizing in a small company. This is only a 3-location company. Typically when you unionize, it's a big corporate-owned, usually a factory, but with hundreds and thousands of employees. Not the probably 15 to 20 that are across all 3 stores. So let's do a couple things that I hate. Barack Obama, of course, touting on the anniversary his signature of DACA, which I have been massively against from the beginning. DACA has been, to me, one of the, and I've gone over this numerous times, has been one of the most cruel programs that the government has ever put out. You're putting people in immigration limbo to tell them, well, to tell your other voters, not them, that if you let the Republican come in the next time, he's just going to go back and mass deport everybody. So you've allowed people to come in, get jobs, make a life, but leave them in immigration limbo. I'm against the idea of mass amnesty. I am fully against the idea of mass amnesty, but mass amnesty would be less cruel to both the American people and the DACA people than this. Hell, mass deportation, because they at least know what they're going to be doing the next week, would be less cruel than what DACA is. DACA is a way to use people as political pawns, which is something that I have been against from the beginning. They're not pawns, they're people. It's time our lawmakers start acknowledging that fact. Other things that I hate. As promised to go, we've got a 40-second clip of Korean Jean-Pierre. They're so embarrassed of Biden's behavior, they're now claiming the videos are AI-generated deepfakes. This is Goebbels level propaganda here. This Korean woman may be dumb, but she's also evil. Yeah, don't believe your lying eyes. Just believe what we tell you to. 1984 propaganda.
Ironically, several recent deepfakes actually attack the president for thanking troops. For thanking troops. That is what they're attacking the president for. Both in Normandy this happened, and again in Italy. And I think that it tells you everything that we need to know about how desperate Republicans are here. Instead of talking about the president's performance in office, and what I mean by that is his legislative wins, what he's been able to do for the American people across the country, we're seeing these deep fakes, these manipulated videos. And it is, again, done in bad faith.
There you go. He's not old and demented. It's AI-generated deepfakes. Starting 3 years before AI was ever a thing. The HD TV Cabbage Patch Kid. I might use that one next time. Alright, other things that I hate. So, J.D. Vance, and this is something that a continuation of the conversation we had earlier with the 23-year-old in the housing market. J.D. Vance, quote tweeting this, saying, not having 20 million illegal aliens who need to be housed, often at public expense, will absolutely make housing more affordable for American citizens. But I see the left strategy of making fun of people for suffering under Biden policies continues apace, with Project Liberal coming back, saying housing prices are a supply-side problem, not a demand-side problem. Blaming immigrants might be popular, but NIMBYs are why housing costs are so high, which, by the way, I fully agree with. NIMBYism, prohibiting where certain housing can be built, and also redlining certain people away from the rest of the people, putting housing projects in certain places, all have massive to do with housing cost. But even Project Liberals got to understand when you add 20 million people to the housing market, it's going to make the prices go up because you've got 20 million more people competing for the same houses. How this didn't get ratioed, I have no idea. I did put my own on here as well. Even you should know that pulling 20 million people out of the demand side will affect the supply side. And the problem with that, of course, is that, and I've talked about this often, you do have to come back and give a balance to this. Well, it might be popular to say, let's just deport all 20 million people and leave the banks holding the bag right away. We've got to make sure to ease into what we're doing. Because if you drop the housing prices that fast, where most people actually have almost all of their value, all their net worth tied up in that house, that's most of the working class. When they suddenly can't take out an equity loan against their home, the equity that they have, or take out a mortgage to pay off some bills, or start a business, or a number of other things. I mean, that goes down the same road of what we saw in 2008. So while, yes, I agree that it needs to be done, we need to do it without dumping the price of a house from $400,000 to $40,000 overnight. All right, and the last one I'm going to do for things that I hate tonight comes to us from CNN. CNN airs a 5-minute segment highlighting how Trump voters better understand the U.S. than CNN, with interviews constantly saying, we're a republic, not a democracy. Mike Lee coming out saying, yeah, we're a constitutional republic. Sure, it's a democratic form of government, but calling it a democracy ignores important constitutional limitations, but put in place by our founders, designed to keep democratic impulses in check. Let's listen to some of the video. It's a 5-minute video, and we're over the 2-hour mark already, so I'm not going to go with the full 5 minutes. But let's listen to a little bit of this here, and I'll explain what a lot of this means.
President Biden touts his re-election campaign as a fight to preserve democracy. But if you ask some Trump supporters, the former president is not a threat to democracy because the United States is not a democracy. CNN's Donnie O'Sullivan spoke to some of those supporters.
What happens if Trump loses?
I don't see him losing.
I don't think he lost the last election, to be honest.
Do you think he's going to win?
Yes. Without a doubt. No doubt.
What if he doesn't this time? What happens to the country?
We're in trouble. We're in big trouble. We're done. If Biden talks about democracy, saving democracy, they're the ones that are killing democracy.
Obviously, there's a lot of criticisms of Trump that he is bad for democracy, that he's bad for American democracy.
Okay,
We
so
are a republic.
We're a republic.
We are
we're
not a democracy.
Republic. We're not a democracy.
One thing we've been hearing at Trump rallies like this over the past few months is that America isn't really a democracy.
America's not a democracy, it's a republic.
It's not a democracy. Okay, democracy is actually not as good as you think it is.
But for centuries, America has celebrated its democracy.
Democracy is worth dying for.
Democracy remains the definition of political legitimacy.
But some Republicans and pro-Trump media are pushing the idea that America is not a democracy.
The United States of America is not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic.
The United States of America is not a democracy. You don't want to be in a democracy.
We are not a democracy. We are a republic.
Is America a democracy?
America is a democracy. It was founded as a democracy.
I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories. I hear a lot of things out on the road. But to hear Americans, people who would describe themselves as patriots, say that America is not a democracy, that stopped me in my tracks.
You are hearing...
All right. That's enough of that propaganda. No, the U.S. is not a democracy. It never has been. And hopefully in my lifetime it never will be. In the sense that it's not a direct democracy where every issue comes back out and gets decided by a town square vote of 50% plus one carries every single thing. We, under various different systems, elect representatives to go back out and represent us to a Congress in a way that is balanced to make sure that the rights of the majority are respected, but without completely trampling over the rights of the minority. Now, what a lot of comments are saying is, well, this just means that Republicans want to rule from a minority. Which is not what a constitutional republic was meant to do, nor was it meant to allow for simple majority rule and everything. What it was meant to do, it was meant to slow down and stop the government from impeding on the lives of the people, to keep them out of our lives, from keeping that simple majority from coming in and saying, hey, you know what? We decide that we want all the stuff from you guys over there because we have more of us than there are of you. And because we're a democracy, there's nothing that you can do to stop it. Democracy rules. What a constitutional republic does not allow the minority to rule, but it allows them to come up and give a dissenting voice and grind most legislation to a halt. And if the legislation is good enough, then you'll have enough of a supermajority that it would probably be good for all the people, or you've convinced enough of the people that it will be good for all the people. In politics, both ways could happen. But no, we are not a democracy, and that's a good thing. Constitutional republic is a form of democracy, but it's split down into smaller portions to give everybody a chance to have a say. So that is what we have for that. And I'm going to sign off for now. Where is the scene? I haven't had music on since I started ranting. And I know we'll be changing it up pretty soon too, but yeah, I'm going to head out of here. I'm going to call my mom. Where's my outro music? I found that before we got started so I don't have to go searching for it because I restarted my computer over the weekend. I got to experiment with a capture card that Palm got me this weekend. I think it's going to work. I just have to figure out how to make it work because the display, what comes in, has a, well, not a massive lag, but enough that you notice it. And I don't think this is actually intended to work by using your center screen as your screen. So I think I need to find a fourth monitor, which means, hey, I get to buy more electronics. And we'll set it up that way. I think I've got it figured out. I just got to do some experimentation with it and figure out why it keeps disconnecting. That's the other thing that worries me about it, is it keeps disconnecting from the source material, which would be my switch. But I think this little guy is going to work after all. But that is behind the scenes technical stuff for the next time. For now, we got to get out of here. Well, we've had an interesting show, definitely. We've covered a lot of topics. It's been a great night. We've got some good chat coming as well, with Dual Helix returning to the Rumble side. Thank you for that. And we're going to head out of here for the night. Take care. Have a fantastic night, you guys. We'll be back here on Wednesday for Diablo 3, which will be, I think we'll probably get through Act 4, start into Act 5, which means I've got to figure this out in a hurry, because I made a promise and said that the next game was going to be Super Mario RPG. That's what I got my Switch for, that's what we're doing with this, and that's what I want to do. So, with that, I will do some behind-the-scenes stuff. I'm going to look into the goats thing to see if, yes, we can do that under rabbinic law, even though I don't live under rabbinic law. I'm going to see how that works. I'm going to look into that. And you guys have a fantastic night. Call your family, hug your friends, go out and touch some grass, unless it's pouring and raining like it is over here. We'll see you here next time, next Monday, and then I think the week after that we go on to the official Tuesday schedule, because I think I'm done with training at that point and I can start working on Saturdays, which means I will start working Wednesday through Saturday, and we can go back to doing this on Tuesday. Take care. Have a fantastic night. We'll see you here next time for more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. It's been it's been a pleasure, and I'm glad you are here. Take care. Good night. And until next time, I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.